Hey guys, Drifter here. Welcome to Ghost in Depth. Today's episode is all about special recoil mechanics because Call of Duty Ghost handles recoil very differently than previous Call of Duty games. Or not very differently, it's got a new mechanic added into it to govern the recoil. The gameplay that you're going to see is me using the ARX 160 with extended mags and silencer. I'm using that one because most people already know the first two shots of the ARX 160 get reduced recoil, and that's one of the reasons that people use the gun. I'm also going to be using the CJB MS that I pick up off the ground, and I picked it up off the ground because it's another weapon that gets a special recoil mechanic added to it. And before we get started today, I would like to apologize up front if my voice sounds funny or if I slur over a few words. I've managed to injure myself and I'm taking some painkillers right now. They're bad for both cognitive thinking, and they give me dry mouth, so doing commentary has been a bit of a challenge this morning. But before we get into what the new mechanic is, I thought I'd give you a very brief breakdown of what the old mechanics are and how they work. Recoil in Call of Duty games is generally determined by three factors: view kick, gun kick, and center speed. View kick is, if you think about it, when you aim down sights, your perspective is kind of tied to your gun as if they were taping a camera to it, and when your gun kicks up, kicks to the left, moves around, something like that, that's changing your recoil. Gun kick is a similar kind of mechanic to gun kick, but it works a little bit differently, and I'd need some calculus to explain that, so we'll just trust me that it's similar, but you won't see it as much. And center speed is how fast your gun returns to rest after shooting. The higher your center speed, the faster it comes back to rest, the less overall recoil you're going to be experiencing. Ghost uses a Battlefield 4 style recoil modifier for the first several shots of some weapons. For those of you that don't know anything about Battlefield games, they added what is usually an increase in recoil on the first couple shots of your weapons firing. So if I got on Battlefield and I got like the AEK or the AK-12 or something and I pulled the trigger, the first one shot on some guns, 2 or 3 shots, would actually kick more and have more recoil than the rest of the ones out of the chamber. And this is to kind of simulate the shock of going from rest to firing a weapon. However, Call of Duty Ghost does a somewhat different thing. Instead of giving, well, most of the negative effects on a weapon to make it kick more, most of the guns in Call of Duty Ghost actually kick less. For example, as I mentioned before, the ARX 160 gets negative 15% kick for the first 2 shots, and I'm going to be going over a lot of weapons. Keep in mind that when I say kick, I'm talking about both view kick and gun kick, so that's 2 different variables that are being affected here. But for the first 2 shots of the ARX 160, you get minus 15% recoil, which is pretty cool. If you were to move over to the FAD, and this one is really crazy, when you get minus 10% kick over the first 10 shots. So the first 10 shots that you get in fully automatic fire, minus 10% kick. That's really cool. That's one of the reasons that the FAD is pretty good for burst fire, because you're going to get less recoil over the course of your entire burst. The Honey Badger gets negative 30% on the first shot, not as effective as the others, but there's a lot of these that get only first shot modifiers. The Remington R5 also minus 15% on the first shot. The SC2010 gets minus 20% on the first shot, which is pretty hefty, but this is also the most accurate fully automatic assault rifle, and I thought I'd put that in here because I've had some people tell me that I'm missing things about the SC2010, multiple people actually, and I've found that it's the most accurate assault rifle in fully automatic fire when you just pull down the trigger and hose it, but I am not able to prove exactly why yet. I don't know what recoil is governing that, or what mechanic is governing that bit of recoil, but I'll let you know when I do find it. The CJB MS, the one that I picked up off the ground, is minus 20% kick over the first 2 shots, which is kind of funny because in this game that means I'm holding an assault rifle and a submachine gun that both have the same sort of special recoil modifier. And the LSAT is minus 30% over the first 3 shots. This is probably the one with the biggest modifier. The LSAT, you're not going to often need more than 3 shots to kill. In your first 3 shots, you get minus 30% recoil. So it's kind of like having a built-in foregrip, or like double built-in foregrip, double grip. So it's very effective. Although not all guns get a positive benefit, there are some that get a negative benefit. Well, not negative benefit, that doesn't make much sense, that's bad English. I'll say a detrimental effect. The AK-12 actually gets plus 15% kick over the first 2 shots, which means it kicks more over the first 2 fully automatic shots, which is why you see people aiming for groin and waiting for it to kick up to the body. This is also why I said the AK-12 was bad for burst fire, because you're going to get additional recoil on your first 2 of the 3 shots in your burst, which is definitely not what you want to be getting. The Amelie, the light machine gun, gets plus 25% kick over the first 3 shots, so it's kind of like the exact opposite of the LSAT. The Ameli's going to kick more over the first couple shots, which means, I don't know, you might not want to be using that for precise shooting. That's maybe more like a hose gun. And speaking of hose, the chainsaw actually gets plus 45% kick over the first 6 shots. That's definitely the largest amount of modifier that this type of recoil mechanic will do, and it's in the negative direction. That means your chainsaw is going to kick like a mule for your first 6 shots. Now thankfully on the chainsaw it doesn't matter quite so much because you're always hip firing it. Well guys, that's all for this episode. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you learned something useful, and hopefully I didn't slur my words too much. If you'd like to check out the previous episode, that's on the AK-12, you can click the box on the left, it'll open a new window. If you'd like to check out the next episode, that's on the FAD, you can click the box on the right, and that will also open a new window. And as always, if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.